Welcome to the deep dive. Close your eyes for a second and picture a millionaire. What do you see? Maybe a sprawling mansion, a garage filled with luxury cars, bespoke suits, designer bags, maybe a yacht.
But yeah, the whole 9 yards.
That's the image, isn't it? The one we get from movies, from advertising, from, the glossy magazines. Wealth looks like hyperconsumption, like showing off.
Right. Big spending.
But is that picture accurate? Is that really who the wealthy people in America are?
It's certainly the dominant cultural narrative, absolutely. It's what, marketers want us to believe that wealth is synonymous with spending lavishly on visible status symbols. But our deep dive today is going to utterly dismantle that stereotype. We're pulling back the curtain based on some truly extensive research years of detailed surveys, in-depth interviews, and forensic analysis of financial data, including IRS records.
Wow.
This is the kind of work laid out in the classic book, The Millionaire Next Door.
That's exactly it. Our mission right now is to dive deep into this research, to unpack its most surprising and frankly counterintuitive findings about how wealth is actually built and maintained in America.
Right.
We're going to reveal the real habits, the quiet lifestyles, the actual demographics of people who have accumulated significant wealth, and most importantly, extract the actionable lessons, the core takeaways that you, our listener, can use.
And let's just, cut right to the chase with the most fundamental revelation from this entire body of work. Wealth is absolutely not the same as income.
The big one.
This is the hill the source stands on. You can earn a huge income, 6 figures, even 7 figures, and still not be wealthy. Why?
Because you spend it all.
Exactly, because you spend it all.
Right.
Every single dollar comes in and goes right back out, or maybe even more goes out if you're using credit.
Yeah, racking up debt.
And the flip side is just as crucial. Many people who are truly wealthy don't have those sky-high incomes, and they definitely aren't living in those exclusive, hyper-expensive neighborhoods you might associate with the rich. They aren't conspicuously displaying their money. They've built wealth quietly, often right under our noses. This distinction between earning a lot and keeping a lot is, it's the cornerstone of everything we're going to explore.
Okay, so let's dig in. Let's start by meeting the real millionaire next door, the person who doesn't fit that Hollywood mold at all.
Right. The source opens with a perfect illustration of this misconception, the anecdote about the trust officer.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
He dealt with wealthy clients, but he clearly didn't understand their actual financial behavior. He dressed the part he imagined wealthy people played expensive suits, a $5,000 watch.
Wow, $5,000 on a watch.
Yeah. What the research found was that typical millionaires spent significantly less on clothing, and the vast majority had never spent even a tenth of that on a watch. Maybe a few $100, tops, for most.
That's incredible. And his car choice was telling too, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. He leased a brand new imported luxury vehicle. Very flashy.
Okay, so what were the actual millionaires drive?
Well, mostly American-made cars. And critically, they often bought them used, non-current models.
Used cars, really?
Yep. That trust officer was performing wealth. He was living the high-consumption image, while the actual wealthy were living the disciplined, low-consumption reality. Big difference.
That really sets the stage.
Exactly. The research describes the businesses and even the personal attire of many millionaires as dull normal.
Dull normal.
Okay, we're talking about owners of welding companies, commercial landscapers, mobile home park owners, pest control services, even auctioneers and rice farmers.
So not exactly glamorous tech startups or hedge funds.
Not typically, no. These are often essential, profitable businesses, but they aren't glamorous. They don't scream, "I'm rich," from the rooftops. And the people running them aren't necessarily wearing $5,000 watches or driving leased Maseratis. They look normal.
And this brings us back to that absolutely fundamental distinction the source emphasizes repeatedly. Wealth is what you accumulate, not what you spend.
Bring it home. Yeah.
Think of it like this. Every dollar you earn is like a seed, right? You can eat that seed immediately that's spending it. Or you can plant it and let it grow into a whole plant that produces more seeds that's investing and accumulating.
Good analogy.
If your high income just fuels immediate spending, that fancy car lease, the expensive suit, the lavish vacations, you're basically eating all your seeds. You have a high income, sure, but you are not building wealth. Spending prevents accumulation. It's really that simple.
And the data from the extensive surveys paints a very, very different picture from the stereotype. The median household income among these millionaires, $131,000.
$131,000.
Yeah.
It's lower than I'd have guessed for millionaires. It's a good income, but not astronomical.
Exactly. Now, the average income is higher, around $247,000, but that's heavily skewed by a small percentage of ultra-high earners, the outliers.
But the averages can be misleading.
Very. The typical millionaire, the one right in the middle of the distribution, isn't making millions per year. They're making a solid, comfortable income, but not necessarily one that screams wealthy by itself.
Okay, but then look at their net worth, what they've actually accumulated.
Now we're talking. The median household net worth is $1.6 million.
$1.6 million median. That's substantial.
It is. Again, the average is higher at $3.7 million due to those outliers, but the median is a solid seven-figure sum. Compare that median income, $131,000, to the median net worth, $1.6 million.
Big difference.
Huge. The source calculates that, on average, their total annual realized income is less than 7% of their total wealth.
Less than 7%, wow.
Yeah. They are living, spending, and supporting their lifestyle on just a small fraction of their accumulated capital. This is a world away from the high-income earner spending 90% or all 100% of what comes in.
That's the key, isn't it? Living on a fraction of their wealth.
Absolutely. And where do they live? The vast majority, 97%, are homeowners. But the average value of their homes, around $320,000.
$320,000 average home value. For millionaires.
Yep. And half of them have lived in the same house for over 20 years.
20 years.
This statistic really pushes back against the image of millionaires constantly upgrading to bigger, more opulent mansions. They find a comfortable home, often in a regular neighborhood, and they stay there. They focus their financial energy elsewhere.
Building assets, not just buying bigger houses.
Precisely. This also ties into how they acquired their wealth. The source very strongly makes the case that around 80% of these millionaires are first-generation affluent.
They didn't inherit it.
Mostly not. They built it. Let that sink in. The statistics are compelling. Only 19% received any income or wealth from a trust fund or estate.
Only 19%.
Fewer than 20% inherited 10% or more of their total wealth. More than half received less than $1 in inheritance. Literally nothing significant.
Wow.
Fewer than a quarter ever received a gift, like an act of kindness, they call it, of $10,000 or more. A stunning 91% never received ownership at a family business as a gift.
So they really did it themselves.
Overwhelmingly. And nearly half didn't even have their college tuition paid for by their parents. This wealth was built block by block, not primarily handed down.
That completely shatters the born with a silver spoon stereotype.
It really does. An interesting social detail the source mentions is about their wives. Roughly half of them do not work outside the home.
Okay.
And among those who do, the most common occupation is teacher.
Teacher? That's interesting.
Yeah, it suggests a prevalence of more traditional family structures within this group, maybe where one spouse focuses more on managing the household and raising children, allowing the other to focus intensely on building the business or professional practice.
And this quiet, less flashy lifestyle doesn't make them happy.
It seems to correlate strongly with happiness, actually. The research indicates that 90% of millionaires who live in homes valued under $300,000 are extremely satisfied with life.
90%.
It's a powerful connection. It implies that the security and freedom provided by wealth accumulation, achieved through disciplined spending and living below your means, contributes more significantly to overall life satisfaction than living in a huge, expensive house or constantly buying new things. Peace of mind, maybe.
That makes a lot of sense. Financial security over flashy consumption.
The IRS data cited by the authors reinforces this. Even among multi-millionaire estates, those over $3.5 million, the median value of their personal residences was under $470,000.
Still relatively modest for that level of wealth.
Right. Less than 10% of their median net worth. Crucially, they had more than 2.5 times more of their wealth invested in investment real estate properties that generate income or appreciate significantly than in their own homes.
So the home is a place to live, not the main investment vehicle.
Exactly. Their personal home is important, sure, but it's not the primary focus of their capital or a main vehicle for accumulating wealth.
What's truly fascinating is that this pattern holds across different regions, right? It's not just a Midwest thing or something.
Not at all. The source found that millionaires in places like Oklahoma and Texas shared the same core values and behaviors, financial independence, living below their means as millionaires in high cost of living areas like New York City or Chicago. It's not a regional quirk. It's a mindset, a set of habits that builds wealth regardless of where you live.
Okay, so that mindset, those habits.
Yeah.
This brings us seamlessly to segment 2, and arguably the single most important characteristic of this group, the power of frugality. Frugal, 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 as the source says.
They really hammer this home. Yeah. If you want to become wealthy or stay wealthy, frugality isn't optional. It's fundamental. The authors use the analogy of physical fitness.
Ah, yes, the jogging analogy.
Right. People who are physically fit maintain that fitness by consistently exercising. Wealthy people maintain and grow their wealth by consistently practicing financial discipline, which includes being frugal. It's a lifestyle.
It's not about being cheap, though, is it? It's about priorities.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing accumulation over consumption. And for many, this discipline is structured. The source found that for every 100 millionaires who don't budget, there are about 120 who do.
So budgeting is common, even among millionaires.
Very common. It's a practical tool they use to control spending and ensure money is directed towards saving and investing.
Like Mrs. Rule. She was a great example.
Mrs. Rule is a perfect case study mentioned in the book. Yeah. She's an auctioneer with an income around $90,000. Comfortable, sure, but not, Wall Street money.
Right.
Yet she has a net worth of over $2 million. How? Because she's incredibly disciplined. She plans her spending, she budgets meticulously, and she knows exactly where her money goes. She consciously directs her income towards building wealth, not just spending it away.
That takes serious dedication.
Yeah.
Now, the source notes that some millionaires don't necessarily use a formal line item budget, right? There's another way.
That's true. But they achieve the same outcome through a different discipline. The pay yourself first strategy.
Pay yourself first. How does that work?
It's about allocating a minimum percentage of their income. The source mentions 15% of their annual realized income directly to investments the moment they receive it, before anything else.
Okay, so investment comes off the top.
Right off the top. Only after that money is set aside for accumulation do they spend the rest on consumption. This creates a kind of artificial scarcity for spending, forcing them to be frugal with what's left over.
Whether they budget or pay themselves first, the key seems to be knowing their spending.
Non-negotiable. This is a huge differentiator. Nearly two-thirds of millionaires surveyed knew precisely how much their families spent each year on essential categories like food, clothing, and shelter.
And the comparison with high-income non-millionaires.
Stark contrast. Only about 35% of them could give those figures. Less than half.
Wow. So the high earners who aren't wealthy, they just don't track it.
Often, no. The book lists the spending categories that many high-income, low-net-worth people often fail to track. Food, clothing, housing, gifts, childcare, loans, charitable contributions, club dues, vehicles, education, vacations, even utilities like heating and lighting.
If you don't know what you're spending your money on, you have absolutely no control over how much you're spending.
Exactly. It's like driving without looking at the gas gauge or speedometer. You're just guessing.
So for those who are high earners but struggle with accumulation, the UAWs, the underaccumulators of wealth, as the book calls them, what can they do? Is professional help needed?
The source suggests professional help is often necessary because these habits are so deeply ingrained. They highlight the role of CPAs like Arthur Gifford, who specialize in helping UAWs transform into PAWs, prodigious accumulators of wealth.
PAWs. I like that. Prodigious accumulators. So what does a CPA like Gifford do?
Well, his approach involves a rigorous audit of a client's spending over a year or two, documenting every single expense.
That sounds intense. Like financial forensics?
It is. And then comes the cold turkey phase. He implements significant consumption cutbacks, often a minimum 15% reduction across the board for a year or two, with plans for further cuts.
15% minimum cut. Ouch.
Yeah. In some extreme cases, the CPA might even take control of the client's checkbook, writing all the checks, paying all the bills, to physically enforce the spending discipline.
Taking over the checkbook.
Yeah.
That's serious intervention.
It shows how hard it can be to break those habits. What's fascinating, though, is how the PAWs view this kind of help. The source notes that PAWs are actually less price-sensitive when it comes to paying for professional services that help them control their spending.
Really? They're willing to pay for help being frugal?
Yes, because they understand the value proposition. They see it as an investment in maintaining their wealth-building behavior. UAWs, on the other hand, might balk at the cost, even though they arguably need the help more.
That UAW mindset, the one focused on high consumption, where does it come from? Is it learned?
Often, yes. It's frequently passed down from parents. The anecdote about Teddy Friend illustrates this vividly. His parents were UAWs. They lived paycheck to paycheck, spent freely when they had money, used credit heavily, and never emphasized saving or investing.
So Teddy just absorbed that.
Completely. Their financial philosophy, which Teddy absorbed, was simple. Earn big to spend big. Income was primarily for consumption, not accumulation.
That's a powerful early lesson, even if it's a negative one, setting the wrong default.
Absolutely. The source notes that Teddy's parents taught him not to smoke, and he followed that advice rigorously. But they didn't teach him anything about investing or accumulating wealth, and he followed that example too, despite earning a significantly higher income than they ever did.
So he had a great income offense.
But no spending defense, just like his parents.
And changing these ingrained habits, especially after decades, is incredibly difficult, isn't it?
Extremely. The source acknowledges this. It requires a real, deep-seated desire to change, and likely professional intervention from a CPA experienced in helping UAWs reverse course. It's not about just getting a bonus or a raise. It's a fundamental, challenging shift in behavior and perspective.
Okay, so disciplined spending is absolutely key. But wealth isn't just about managing money, right? It's also about how you manage your other finite resources, your time, and your energy.
Exactly. Moving to segment 3, the source highlights how PAWs and UAWs prioritize these resources very differently.
This makes sense. We all only have 24 hours in a day, and our energy levels aren't infinite. You have to choose where to focus.
Precisely. The difference lies in allocation. PAWs, the prodigious accumulators, allocate significant amounts of time and energy to studying and planning their investments. They see this as a productive use of their limited resources, essential for growing their wealth.
So they're actively working on their wealth.
Actively planning, yes. UAWs, on the other hand, tend to spend their time and energy very differently. They might spend hours shopping for consumer goods, maintaining luxury items they've purchased, or constantly searching for deals on high-status artifacts, things that don't build wealth.
This brings us to the source's classic comparison, the case study of Dr. North versus Dr. South. They sound like characters from a parable.
They almost are. Both are successful physicians, similar age, similar income levels, similar family structures, but their financial outcomes couldn't be more different.
Okay, lay it out for us. Dr. South first, the UAW.
Dr. South is the quintessential UAW physician. He earns a high income, typical for his profession, but he has accumulated very little wealth relative to that income. He spends freely, lives an expensive lifestyle, and invests minimally.
Sounds stressful, actually.
He is stressed. He's constantly worried about being able to maintain his current standard of living, worried about whether his income is sufficient to keep up with his family's purchasing habits, even worried about his children's own spending habits.
And how does he spend his time, besides worrying?
A lot of it is spent pursuing perceived bargains on luxury items. The source gives the example of him excitedly buying a $65,000 exotic sports car near dealer's cost, believing he got a great deal.
But it's still a $65,000 rapidly depreciating asset.
Exactly. It requires maintenance, insurance. It's a consumption item, not a wealth-building asset, no matter the deal.
Okay, so contrast that with Dr. North, the PAW physician.
Dr. North is the mirror image. Same profession, similar income, similar family setup. But he has far fewer financial worries. He's not afraid of potentially needing to reduce his standard of living in the future, and he isn't concerned about his income being insufficient for his family's purchasing habits. He has peace of mind.
And how did he achieve that peace of mind? What does he do differently?
Through discipline and frugality and allocating his resources differently. He buys his suits at a discount, often seeking out high-quality used clothing that's been tailored, fits great, costs less.
Smart. And his car. Not a $65,000 sports car.
Not quite. His most recent car purchase, 6 years prior to the research, was a 3-year-old used Mercedes he bought for $35,000. He understands that value retention and utility are more important than driving the newest, most expensive status symbol.
That's a huge difference in approach. What about their investment habits?
This highlights the difference in resource allocation even further. Dr. South, the UAW, is an active trader. He uses 4 different brokerage firms, constantly buying and selling.
Churning the account.
Pretty much. He spends a significant amount of money on trading fees and investment advice, even though his total securities portfolio is relatively small, less than $200,000. He also openly admits he's not a fan of pension plans and has very little saved in his own, only about $40,000.
Wow, for a doctor, that's low.
It is. And get this. He actually sees his high realized income from frequent trading as a problem because it triggers substantial tax bills every year, adding to his financial stress.
He's creating his own tax headaches by trading too much.
Precisely. Now, Dr. North, the PA, is a stark contrast. He acts as his own financial advisor, self-taught through studying the market. He spends $0 on fees or external advice.
Zero. He does it all himself.
All himself. He rarely sells stocks. He buys based on careful study and holds for the long term, minimizing transaction costs and deferring taxes. His philosophy is similar to Warren Buffett's invest in areas you understand. For him, that's the medical industry, drug companies, medical instrument manufacturer.
Invest in what you know.
Right. And he has built a massive profit-sharing plan through his practice, totaling over $2 million. He understands the power of long-term tax-advantaged compounding.
$2 million in his retirement plan versus Dr. Selt's $40,000. That says it all.
Doesn't it? This reinforces the point about time allocation. The source's data shows that PAWs, like Dr. North, allocate nearly twice the amount of time per month to investment planning as UAWs, like Dr. South.
They're putting in the work.
They are. UAWs often keep large amounts of money in cash or near cash accounts, seeing them as investments because they are liquid and easily accessible for spending. This requires less planning time, sure, but it also hinders significant long-term growth. Cash isn't really an investment in that sense.
Yeah, inflation eats away at it.
The stockbroker example is another classic illustration from the book. You'd assume a stockbroker, with their knowledge and access, would be incredibly wealthy, right?
You'd think so.
But the source points out that many high-income stockbrokers aren't wealthy at all. Why? Because they treat their personal portfolio like their trading desk. They constantly buy and sell, realizing gains immediately, generating high taxable income, and preventing their investments from compounding over the long term.
So they're too active for their own good.
Exactly. Millionaires, the study found, often prefer brokers who advocate a less active buy-and-hold strategy. Less churn, more growth.
So choosing who gives you financial advice is as critical as the advice itself. You need someone aligned with long-term accumulation.
Absolutely. The source frames selecting a financial advisor as hiring a key employee or selecting a top supplier for your household's business, your family's finances. It's a decision that should be approached with rigor.
Like Mr. Martin.
Yeah, Mr. Martin, the millionaire who demanded to see potential advisors' credentials and, crucially, data showing their clients' actual income and wealth appreciation before he would even consider working with them. He was vetting them like a serious business partner.
That's intense due diligence.
It is. And it's the total opposite of UAWs, who might hire a financial advisor based on a cold call or a slick marketing pitch without doing any significant background check. They don't treat it as the crucial financial decision for their household that it really is.
Okay, moving to segment 4. The source looks at another highly visible area where the difference between high income and actual wealth is displayed, or perhaps not displayed: cars. The title of this section in the book is blunt. You aren't what you drive.
It's a great title because it's so true in this context. Revisit the trust officer example, leasing a current luxury model. What do the majority of millionaires drive?
You said American-made, often used.
Exactly. Only a minority drive foreign vehicles. An even smaller minority drive foreign luxury cars. And very few lease. The majority buy American-made vehicles, and crucially, they often buy non-current models. They buy reliable transportation that retains value reasonably well, not rolling status symbols that scream, "Look at me."
The source categorizes millionaires' vehicle acquisition habits, right? There are different types.
Yeah, they mentioned dealer loyalists who might buy new or used but prioritize convenience or maybe a relationship with the dealer. Then you have the dealer shoppers who are particularly prone to buying used vehicles.
And this used vehicle-prone dealer shopper group that really embodies the PAW mindset.
Yes, absolutely. This group scores the highest on all measures of frugality in the study. Their belief system is deeply ingrained. Financial independence is their primary goal, and frugality is the essential tool to get there. They make a conscious effort and, importantly, teach their children that buying status artifacts like expensive new cars is the opposite of building wealth. It's a consumption decision, pure and simple, not an investment.
So how do these used vehicle shoppers approach buying a car? What's their process?
The source details their habits. They typically look for low-mileage vehicles that are usually 2 to 4 years old. Get past that initial depreciation hit.
Smart.
Their favorite makes are a mix of practical American cars and some reliable foreign brands, but again, often not the absolute newest or most expensive versions. Ford, Mercedes, Cadillac, Lexus, Chevy, Nissan, Acura are mentioned. They are patient in their search, often finding deals from private sellers, cutting out the dealership markup and hassle.
Patience pays off. Any specific stories?
Oh yeah, the anecdotes here are telling. Mr. TF, the stockbroker, who clearly enjoyed the idea of luxury cars but bought late-model used ones, he even tried to propose a reciprocal business relationship with a dealer owner just to get a better deal on a used Benz.
Trying to leverage his business for a car deal.
Right. And then there's shopper 4, the cotton farmer's wife. She perfectly exemplifies the mindset. She drove 150 miles from her rural home to Atlanta with her husband, specifically to buy a used Acura from a private seller.
150 miles.
Why? Because she knew she could get a better price there. And she planned to resell it later for close to what she paid, minimizing the actual cost of ownership. When asked if her colleagues would be impressed by her car, her husband dryly remarked they'd be more impressed if they knew how little she paid for it.
That sums it up perfectly.
Yeah.
Tried in the value, not the status.
Exactly. That captures the paw philosophy value over perceived status.
This circles back beautifully to the idea of income offense versus spending defense.
Absolutely. High income, low net worth individuals often have an excellent income offense. They're great at earning money. But they have a terrible spending defense. They let it all flow out. Millionaires understand that while income is important, a strong spending defense, being frugal, controlling consumption, is equally, if not more, critical for actually accumulating wealth. You can earn millions, but if you spend millions, you'll end up with zero wealth. Defense wins championships, right?
Good analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving into segment 5, we tackle a topic that is often emotionally charged. Economic outpatient care, or EOC.
Right. This is the term the source uses for the financial gifts, subsidies, and economic support that affluent parents or grandparents provide to their adult children and grandchildren. Basically handouts.
And the findings here are some of the most surprising and, for many parents, probably the most difficult to hear, aren't they?
Very much so. The core finding is pretty stark. There's an inverse relationship between the amount of financial support adult children receive from their parents and their own ability to accumulate wealth.
Wait, inverse. So more gifts mean less wealth for the kids?
Generally, yes. The more dollars they get as gifts, the fewer dollars they tend to save and invest themselves. They become less financially productive, less disciplined.
Wow. And the flip side?
Conversely, adult children who receive little or no EOC from affluent parents tend to accumulate significantly more wealth on their own. They learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Furthermore, providing substantial EOC also reduces the probability that the parents themselves will become truly wealthy, especially if it ties up capital they could be investing for their own future. It's a double whammy.
The data on this must be interesting.
It's quite striking. Table 5.2 in the source compares gift receivers and non-receivers across various professions, doctors, lawyers, accountants, etc., at similar age and income levels. In almost every category, with a couple exceptions we'll mention, the gift receivers had significantly lower net worth and even lower annual incomes than their non-receiving counterparts.
Lower income, too. That's surprising.
Yeah. For example, accountants who received gifts had only 57% of the net worth and 78% of the income of accountants who did not receive gifts. Same profession, same age group.
Okay, so what counts as EOC? What forms does it take?
It takes many forms, some obvious, some more subtle. Common types mentioned include giving money for a home down payment. 59% of affluent parents with adult children provide this.
That's a majority doing that.
Yeah. Making mortgage payments, 17%. Providing forgiveness loans that are never actually repaid, 61% do this. Paying medical or dental expenses, 45%. Gifting valuable collections like coins or stamps, around 25%. Transferring securities, 17%. Or gifting ownership in a family business, 15%. Lots of ways to give money away.
Okay, so with all this help, why can EOC be so detrimental to the recipient's ability to build wealth? What's the mechanism?
The source outlines several key reasons. First, it can perpetuate a cycle of dependence. A gift for a home down payment, while seemingly helpful, can put the recipient into a lifestyle, bigger house, higher taxes, more upkeep that requires continued support just to maintain it.
So the gift creates a need for more gifts.
Exactly. They might start seeing the parent as a constant fish dispensing machine rather than learning to fish for themselves, as the saying goes.
Right, it doesn't teach the underlying skills.
Precisely. The source contrasts giving Mary help with her home and mortgage payments, which essentially taught her how to spend money, with scenarios where parents subsidize education or help start a business. Those can be ways to teach the recipient how to become productive and self-sufficient, if structured correctly.
Another significant issue mentioned is that when people are spending other people's money, they often become less price sensitive.
Absolutely. The source provides the example of Lamar versus the sales executive. Lamar, a recipient of EOC, was largely indifferent to high prices. Why should he care? It wasn't his hard-earned money. The sales executive, who earned and saved his own money, was very price conscious. Lamar found it psychologically easier to spend the money he received as gifts than the money he had to earn and save himself. Big difference in mindset.
That makes sense. Easy come, easy go.
And gifts can also, paradoxically, trigger more consumption. The anecdote about the $9,000 rug is a perfect illustration.
Oh yeah, the rug that costs more money later.
Exactly. It was a very generous gift, but it was so expensive and luxurious that it made all the recipients' existing, more modest furniture look totally out of place. So they felt compelled to go out and spend a similar amount on new, expensive furniture and fixtures just to match the rug, leading to significantly increased spending overall. The gift snowballed.
That's a subtle trap. And you mentioned earlier that gift receivers often don't distinguish between their money and their parents' money.
Yeah, this is a really important point. They tend to view their parents' accumulated wealth and capital almost as their own income stream, available to be spent. The source notes that despite having significantly less actual wealth and income than non-gift receivers, the recipients of EOC are statistically just as likely to perceive themselves as financially well off.
So they feel rich even when they aren't, relatively speaking.
Exactly. This distorted perception hinders their motivation to accumulate independently. Why save if mom and dad will just give you more?
And how does this impact their actual saving and investing?
Directly and negatively. Gift receivers invest significantly less than 65% of what non-receivers invest annually, according to the study. And the source suggests even this figure is likely an overestimation, because gift receivers often overlook significant credit purchases when calculating how much they've truly saved or invested relative to their spending. They might think they're saving, but the debt cancels it out.
Now, there's a curious anomaly the source pointed out. Teachers and professors. What was different about them?
Right, this is interesting. Unlike recipients in most other professions, teachers and professors who received gifts do tend to accumulate more wealth than their non-receiving counterparts in the same field and age group, despite having lower average incomes than many other professions.
So EOC actually helped them. Why?
It seems so. They have a much higher propensity to save and invest the gift money rather than just spending it. The source speculates that perhaps their profession, which involves teaching and modeling behavior, makes them better at applying frugality and discipline to their own lives. They practice what they preach, maybe.
That's a fascinating exception. It highlights the importance of the recipient's underlying habits.
Absolutely. The contrast between Henry, the teacher, a Pa with lower income but higher net worth and very frugal habits, and Josh, the attorney, a UAW with higher income but lower net worth, a heavy consumer who receives gifts, starkly illustrates that income level is not the primary determinant of wealth. Frugality and disciplined saving investing are crucial, and receiving EOC can, for many, undermine the development of those essential habits.
The story of Burl and Susan really drives this home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The self-made couple whose kids became dependent.
It's perhaps the most powerful example in this section. Burl and Susan came from poor backgrounds and became self-made millionaires. Their parents couldn't give them money, but they gave them discipline, resilience, and the sheer necessity to succeed. They built their wealth because they had to.
Adversity was their teacher.
Exactly. But later, they tried to help their own children by providing gifts, assuming it would give them a leg up. But instead, they found their children became dependent, lacking that drive Burl and Susan had. The very adversity and lack of financial support from their parents is what forged Burl and Susan's wealth-building capabilities. They inadvertently removed that essential ingredient for their kids.
That's a tough lesson for affluent parents.
It's very tough. This leads us into segment 6, which explores these complex family dynamics and the challenges of intergenerational wealth transfer, a phenomenon the source provocatively terms affirmative action family style.
Ooh, that's a loaded term. What do they mean by that?
Well, affluent parents face significant fears related to their estates. Potential estate taxes, adult children fighting over inheritances, and accusations of favoritism. These fears are understandable.
Sure. Dividing wealth can cause huge family rifts.
Absolutely. But the source highlights a key finding that often exacerbates the negative effects of wealth transfer. Affluent parents tend to give more EOC and eventually larger inheritances to their least economically productive adult children.
Wait, They give more to the kids who are struggling?
Often, yes. The intention is often good to strengthen the weak, provide a safety net, or compensate for perceived struggles. However, this can inadvertently weaken them further by reducing motivation and fostering dependence, while giving less to the more productive children who are already strong financially and probably need it less.
So it can backfire, reinforcing weakness instead of strength.
Precisely. Mrs. BPF's case is a prime example of this. Her wealthy parents wanted to help her start a business. Okay, great idea on the surface. But look how they did it. They gave her the business debt-free. She put in none of her own capital, removing any personal risks.
No skin in the game.
None. They provided economic inpatient care. She lived at home rent-free with no household responsibilities, removing the pressure of necessity. And they gave her a substantial annual cash subsidy of $60,000 on top of it all.
So they removed all the struggle.
They removed the key drivers of entrepreneurial success: necessity, personal risk, and the need for disciplined money management. They tried to guarantee her success, but ended up undermining it.
And what was the result for Mrs. BPF herself?
Despite all the support, or maybe because of it, Mrs. BPF is filled with fears that are uncommon among self-made affluent individuals. Fear of estate taxes, fear of her own standard of living decreasing, fear of her business failing even though it was handed to her, fear of not having enough for her own retirement, and fear of her siblings accusing her of getting preferential treatment. The extensive gifts created dependence and anxiety, not independence and security.
Wow, that's a cautionary tale.
It really is. The source also delves into what it describes as economic affirmative action for daughters. It notes that affluent parents often tend to subsidize their daughters more than their sons.
Why daughters more than sons?
The authors connect this, in part, to acknowledging marketplace biases and the persistent income disparities women face in high-income professions. Table 6.3 in the source shows, for example, female physicians earning only 52% of the average earnings of male physicians, and female lawyers earning only 57.5% of male lawyers' average earnings.
That's a huge gap still.
It is. And while the number of women earning $100,000 or more has grown significantly, the ratio of men to women in that category remains heavily skewed, around 5.1, according to the data they cited.
Okay, so parents might be trying to compensate for that societal gap.
That's the theory. The source poses a critical question. Does parental subsidization of daughters, perhaps driven by a desire to compensate for these marketplace biases, or even a subtle lack of belief in their daughter's ability to achieve full financial independence that, don't worry, honey, we will help you out financially? Attitude, does that inadvertently perpetuate this inequality by reducing the daughter's intrinsic drive and motivation to become fully self-sufficient? Does it send the wrong message?
That's a really provocative question. Does helping too much actually hinder?
It's the central dilemma. The Anne versus Beth anecdote illustrates this dynamic within one family. Remember them.
Yes, the sisters with millionaire parents and refused the help.
Right. Anne, the younger daughter, chose a different path from her older sister Beth. Although Anne eventually gave up her career, she explicitly refused EOC from her parents, having observed the negative effects on her sister. She lived further away and maintained her independence fiercely.
And Beth, the older sister.
Beth was a type B housewife who lived in what the source terms subsidized housing very close to her parents. She received significant annual cash gifts, $20,000 every Christmas.
20 grand just for Christmas.
Yeah. And her parents exerted a lot of control over her life. Her mother was constantly involved, influenced her choice of home, and the parents treated Beth's husband almost like a handyman or chauffeur, not an equal partner. Anne was shocked and disturbed by her parents' treatment of Beth and her husband, which only reinforced her own resolve to remain independent.
So seeing the strings attached made Anne want no part of it.
Exactly. Another powerful sister comparison is Sarah versus Alice. Sarah became a successful executive. When she left home and pursued her career, her affluent father, Papa, actually cut her off financially.
Cut her off, that sounds harsh.
It might seem harsh, but this deliberate withdrawal of financial support, though painful at the time, forced Sarah to become incredibly determined and financially independent. She had to make it on her own.
And Alice?
Her sister Alice chose a different path. She stayed home, became Papa's girl, married a low-income husband, and received continuous EOC from her father, ultimately inheriting the bulk of his estate. Papa's actions, perhaps unintentionally, strengthened the daughter who was already strong, Sarah, by forcing her independence, and weakened the daughter who was already weaker, Alice, by fostering her dependence.
It's like he rewarded dependence and punished independence, even if he didn't mean to.
That's how it played out. This pattern is also evident in the category of the unemployed adult child. These children are often recipients of more EOC than their working siblings.
They get more help if they don't have a job.
Often, yes. They are also more likely to live at home. The source mentions about 1 in 4 males aged 25-35 with affluent parents still live at home or live nearby. Parents often view them as needing money more, both now and in the future, and they are consequently more likely to receive larger inheritances. They often have very close emotional and economic ties to their parents, sometimes acting as helpers or companions, which further reinforces the cycle of dependence. It's complicated.
Very complicated family dynamics.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears to segment 7. A critical factor in accumulating wealth is often related to career and finding your niche. All right. What did the research find about millionaire occupations?
Yes, this is significant. The source identifies a key characteristic of millionaires. Most are business owners, including self-employed professionals. They are about 4 times more likely to be millionaires than individuals who work for others.
4 times more likely if you own a business.
Right. Even among the affluent non-retirees surveyed, over 2/3 were self-employed business owners. Entrepreneurship is a major path.
So does it matter what kind of business? Is it just about picking the right industry?
Not necessarily. The source makes it clear that it's not just about starting any business or buying some generic how-to guide. Success isn't guaranteed just because you pick a seemingly profitable industry or think you can follow a formula. The Home Depot example is perfect here.
Right, they didn't just open a hardware store.
Exactly. They fundamentally reinvented the industry through talent, discipline, and courage. They set their own high standards of success, not just followed average industry profitability data. It's about execution and differentiation.
But industry profitability does matter to some extent, doesn't it? Things change.
Oh, absolutely. The profitability of industries does change over time, influenced by external factors like competition, consumer preferences, government actions, technology. The source gives examples. The dry cleaning industry saw significant profit drops over the years. The coal mining industry saw the number of businesses plummet by 90% in just 8 years.
Wow, 90% gone.
Yeah, but the few companies that survived those tough times became highly profitable. Successful business owners endure tough times. These periods often weed out less capable competition, leaving higher returns for those who persevere and adapt. Tough times can actually strengthen the strong.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned business owners and self-employed professionals. Is there a distinction there in how parents guide their kids?
Yes, the source notes that affluent parents often encourage their children to become self-employed professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, dentists, engineers, rather than taking over a traditional trade business, like maybe the family plumbing company or something. They are 5 times more likely to send their kids to medical school and 4 times more likely to send them to law school than other parents.
Why the preference for professions over other businesses?
The source explains why professionals often have advantages. First, a lower failure rate compared to many general small businesses. It's perceived as a safer path. Second, they often have higher average profitability margins.
Higher margins, meaning more profit per dollar of revenue.
Exactly. A physician's office, for instance, had an average net income of $87,000 with a remarkable 56.2% return on receipts, meaning for every dollar of revenue, over 56 cents was profit. Compare that to coal mining, where the average net income was higher at $196,600, but the return on receipts was only 8.2%. You need way more volume, way more revenue in mining to generate that profit.
Got it. Professionals often have high-margin service businesses. Any other advantages?
Yes, they also often have more control over their own schedules and job descriptions. This is crucial because it allows them to allocate time for essential activities, like financial planning, something we talked about earlier, which is often difficult for busy employees working for someone else.
Control over time is a big one. Now, the source also challenges the common myth of the fearless entrepreneur, right?
Yes, absolutely. Using the anecdote of Larry, a printing services broker, it defines true courage not as the absence of fear, but as behaving in a way that conjures up fear and then dealing with it effectively. Entrepreneurs feel fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of financial loss. But they don't let it paralyze them. They confront it and overcome it.
So courage isn't fearlessness, it's acting despite the fear.
Exactly. They cite figures like Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, who was a former ambulance driver, and Lee Iacocca of Chrysler Individuals, who demonstrated immense courage in building and turning around businesses. Ray Kroc even reportedly welcomed cold callers.
Old callers, really?
Yeah, because their willingness to put themselves out there, face rejection, demonstrated courage. He saw potential in people like Betty Agate, who sold Catholic Bibles door to door in Chicago's financial district. The source actually suggests exposing children to sales roles or activities where they have to face rejection or potential failure, like running for class office or selling Girl Scout cookies, as a way to build this kind of crucial courage early on.
Learning resilience through manageable challenges. Makes sense. Okay, finally, in segment 8, the source looks at the enduring lessons from these findings and touches on estate planning considerations.
Right. We circled back to the fears of affluent parents regarding their estate's taxes, children fighting, being accused of favoritism. These are very real concerns. The dialogue between Mr. Stern and the Mr. Young, the IRS agent in the book, illustrates how wealth can appear to vanish through predecedent giving, leaving little for taxable estates.
So giving money away before death to avoid taxes.
Yes. But as we've discussed, this very giving can paradoxically hinder the recipient's ability to build their own wealth. It solves one problem, but potentially creates another.
So what strategies emerge from the research for successful wealth transfer that avoid the pitfalls of spoiling the kids? How do you pass on wealth effectively?
Dr. North's family provides some key rules based on their success. First, and maybe most importantly, teach children discipline and frugality by example. His rules were simple, practical things: not abusing belongings, saving energy, putting things away properly, helping others. Basic life discipline.
Setting the standard through daily actions.
Exactly. Another crucial rule: ensure children don't fully realize the extent of your affluence until after they've established their own mature, disciplined lifestyle and chosen a profession.
Hide the wealth, seriously.
To some extent, yes. Dr. North deliberately hid his wealth from his children until they were adults and financially independent. The idea is to let them develop their own work ethic and financial habits without the distorting influence of knowing there's a huge safety net or inheritance waiting.
That takes real intention and restraint from the parents.
It really does. What kind of gift is helpful? Subsidizing education is consistently highlighted as the most frequently mentioned gift received by millionaires from their own parents that was seen as genuinely helpful, investing in their human capital.
Okay, so education good, other gifts maybe not so much.
Generally, yes. Beyond education, the vast majority, 2/3 of millionaires in this study, received no substantial economic gifts from their parents. And finally, if you do give, consider giving productive assets like private stock in a family business that requires engagement and responsibility rather than easily consumable gifts like cash or easily tradable securities that just get spent.
Give them responsibility, not just money.
That's the idea. When it comes to distributing the estate itself after death, the source strongly advocates selecting professional, neutral executors, attorneys, or accountants over appointing one of your children.
Why not a child? Seems natural.
The reasoning from individuals like Mr. Harvey and Mr. Graham in the book is straightforward and wise. It's far better for your children to potentially be frustrated with an impartial professional managing the distribution than to be fighting bitterly with each other over decisions made by a sibling executor. It preserves family harmony, or tries to.
Keeps the family dynamics out of the legal process as much as possible. Smart.
Looking ahead, the source anticipates a significant increase in the number of millionaires and large estates in the coming decades. This will likely bring increased pressure from governments looking for revenue, potentially including things like wealth taxes.
More scrutiny, more taxes.
It's likely. This future environment will drive even greater demand for specialists like tax attorneys and potentially immigration lawyers, as wealthy individuals seek legal strategies to preserve their accumulated capital and sometimes even their residency in a changing global landscape. Wealth defense becomes more complex.
And finally, you mentioned the value of early experience.
Yes, the value of early, even humble experience in shaping financial habits shouldn't be underestimated. Ken, the son of a Pa and a successful executive and astute investor himself, points to his first job as a busboy.
A busboy?
Yeah. Working hard for minimum wage and seeing how the other people lived, the daily grind for modest pay, ingrained in him the value of money and the necessity of hard work. This early exposure reinforced his pop habits, even as he went on to earn a high income later in life. It grounded him.
That connection to the value of a dollar earned through hard work seems critical.
It really does.
So after this deep dive, what's the core message we take away from The Millionaire Next Door for you, our listener?
Yeah.
It's clear, isn't it? And it really flies in the face of popular culture.
Completely.
The typical millionaire is not the high-spending, flashy status seeker. They are overwhelmingly disciplined, frugal accumulators.
That's the profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They live below their means, prioritize financial independence above showing off, and are often successful business owners or self-employed professionals who have built their wealth through consistent habits of saving, investing, and conscious consumption, rather than inheriting it or simply earning a huge income that they spend immediately.
It really challenges us, to look inward. Do you budget or at least consciously pay yourself first for investment? Do you know precisely where your money is going each month? Or is it just disappearing?
Good question.
How are you allocating your most limited resources, your time and energy? Is it towards planning for financial independence or towards shopping, maintaining possessions, and chasing fleeting deals? Are you focused on accumulating wealth or just displaying a high income?
And if you have children, what fundamental message about money and financial discipline are you actively modeling and teaching them through your actions, not just words?
That's huge, yeah.
Here's a thought to leave you with. In a world saturated with advertising and social pressures, constantly pushing us towards hyperconsumption and displaying status, how intentional, how disciplined, how consistently dull normal must we really be to resist that tide and adopt the quiet, powerful habits of the truly wealthy?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And considering the immense amount of wealth projected to transfer between generations in the coming years, how might the lessons from this research about the potential pitfalls of economic outpatient care reshape the financial landscape and maybe even the character of the next generation of affluent individuals? Will they learn these lessons or repeat the mistakes?
Something significant to consider. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Indeed. A lot to think about. Until next time.